Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to OBR Weekly. It's Wednesday. It's 7. It's time for Fred and I to do our thing. He's the legend over there, blowing his nose right over there. Fred Greetham, he's the legend. Yeah. How you doing, Fred?
I'm doing great.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I'm doing great as well because we're going to talk Cleveland Browns for the next hour. And the visitors, viewers of this program are going to hit us up with all kinds of comments and questions in the chat room because that's what we need in order to complete the show. We need to know what you want to talk about, what you want answered, not necessarily what we want to talk about. So we got a couple of special things going on tonight. The first off is that later in the program, we are going to give away several hard copies of the Our Lads draft guide. Now, there's all kinds of draft guides around, but Our Lads has been around for years, for decades. They are established. They know what they're doing. And so we're going to give away some of those draft guides, but you have to be in the chat room to participate in the big giveaway. So if you're watching this on X or YouTube or something and you're not in the chat room, well, go get in the chat room so you can get a copy of the Our Lads guide. Second special is that we're going to have a special guest tonight for a brief period of time. And I will introduce him a little bit later. And he will talk about something of great interest to him. So with that, without further ado, without more bloviating, let's rock and roll here. Let's talk about the news of the week, Fred. Big news, the visitors keep dropping by Berea. We have now a lengthy list in Insider Central of everyone who has visited Berea that we're aware of. And included in that group are 3 quarterbacks, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, and Tyler Sluck. And we are going to talk about quarterbacks here extensively a little bit later on in the program because we're going to fix the quarterback problem finally. After 25 years, Fred and I are going to do that. But the Browns have also invited a number of defensive tackles and linebackers for these top 30 visits. Are you surprised by that at all, Fred, that they're talking to defensive tackles and that they're talking to linebackers with that group?
No, I mean, I haven't ever done a study on correlation. I know a lot of times they draft guys that weren't in the visits, and a lot of times it's been the other way where, guys that visited weren't drafted, and then guys not visiting were drafted. I think a lot of it depends on, what happens in the draft. I think the one thing is defensive tackles. We haven't heard a lot about that, but I believe according to our list, there's been 4 defensive tackles in there. Mm-hmm. That usually tells me a little more smoke, there's fire. I don't know if you're going to, and they might bring in a couple more before. I know 30, I don't think is complete. I thought it was about 20 that's been in there. So 4 out of 20 are defensive tackles. And I read somewhere that it's not, like I looked at Daniel Jeremiah's, he's got 5 defensive tackles in the top 50 players.
Right.
But I read somewhere, I think it was in Dane Brugler's draft guide, something like 55 projected to be maybe as high as fifth round or so there's draftable guys might not be at the top of the draft, but guys that they probably will fill in, and hopefully they'll do a better job than Siaka Ika, who's a 3rd round bust. And
right,
I guess last year so far, Jawan Briggs, the 7th rounder, seems to be pretty good, but Perrion Winfrey, I think he was a 4th round pick. So all things being said, I don't read a lot into it, but I just think you have to do your due diligence, and I'm going to call you out. I think the quarterback you're talking about is
Shook. Yeah, I spelled it wrong and pronounced it wrong. So good call out. I produce these slides in a rather rapid fashion.
For a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Keep me behind the scenes. Dear Lord. At any rate, so, lots of visits. One of the other items which appeared this week is Jordan Schultz reported that the Steelers are bringing in Shedeur Sanders, often, discussed as the second pick in the draft. Pittsburgh holds the 21st pick in the draft, and they're still going to bring Shedeur Sanders in to talk to him. You suspect a trade up from the Steelers, or you think it's possible Sanders could fall that far?
I don't know, but he might be anywhere. He might be in the range that they could trade up. They're pretty desperate. I mean, if you look at this, I don't know what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, but it doesn't seem like he's that excited to put his name on the contract. He's kind of leaving his options open to see if is there anything out west, I could go to, and but if Rodgers turns them down, then they're sitting there, or the Browns are sitting there with Kenny Pickett as their only option now. They're sitting there with Mason Rudolph. And they have the 21st pick. So it isn't like, we all know that even if Shedeur Sanders isn't the dream quarterback, he's better than Kenny Pickett, and the argument is you don't take him at 2. Well, then you don't have a quarterback, that's your option. If nothing else works out, you can draw all these plans, but in a perfect world, it'd be nice you could get Kirk Cousins and not worry about the quarterback for a couple years and then develop somebody. But anyway, so the Steelers don't want to get there and not have done due diligence. And if he was available, why you wouldn't just take him unless you're the Browns who took Justin Gilbert, you wouldn't want to take him without having, met with him up close and personal or whatever. I don't know. But all these teams, they have nothing else to do but bring in people and do visits and go around and do things every day. So I'm not surprised. I assume everybody. The Browns can only take one of these guys, and they've had, 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks they've talked to, so yeah. I think all teams pretty much do that, even if you're sure somebody's not going to be there or going to be the first pick. Cam Ward's supposed to be the first pick, but I think everybody's talked to him, and in case he's not.
Yeah. I think that will be wasted time by the Browns talking to Cam Ward, but you never know. Weirder things have happened, and weirder things will happen in the future. But Shedeur Sanders, that's not our only news item on Shedeur. He also has made some rather brash statements. He says, all I need is an opportunity. Whatever franchise wants to change their franchise, and there's no doubt who you go with. I've done it over and over, so you would be a fool not to pick me. Checks all boxes, it leads to one guy, he finishes up. So he's, rather confident. He's got a confident, let's say, brash personality. That can either be an asset or a detriment, Fred. With a guy like Shedeur Sanders, do you think he's the type of guy that the Cleveland Browns want in their locker room? Do you think they need that attitude or try to avoid that attitude?
It really depends on your personality and how you like it. You want a confident guy. To be honest, I stood right in front of Baker Mayfield, 5, whatever it was, in 2018, when he said they should take me because I'm the only one that can turn things around. And it kind of turned me off. I didn't really want him to come to Brown just because I just like, this guy's just so too cocky. But, he was a guy if the truth be told, he did turn the Browns losing culture around. He might have done it in a different way or whatever, but you do want some of that, but you also want some humbleness, and he's not going to bring that. He is going to be the face of the franchise, and if you bring him in, that's what you're going to get. And I think that's why half the people don't want him, half of them do. But I think some of it with you don't have a quarterback, so you're going to let him go to New York or the Steelers or wherever he ends up, and then you take the chance on missing out if he was really good. It's just so hard to project them, and it's just there's a reason they're going to be starting their 41st quarterback, because it's hard to get it right. And most people either love him or hate him. The fans I've talked to, or people, even around the league. So
Mm-hmm.
the thing I can't get over is if he's good enough to go 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, because he's a quarterback, why doesn't that trump the situation? I get
Right.
there's better players in the draft, but that's the question they have to come up with.
Yeah, the Browns supposedly like Shedeur. They think a lot of him, but there just seems to be a talent drop off after Carter and Hunter, and so a
Well,
lot of people.
why aren't both teams, the Titans and the Browns, saying whoever, we'll take whoever we want? Why don't the Browns say we'll take the other one? I've
Mhm.
been in multiple press conferences where they won't answer that.
Right,
They're good with either one. Back before Ward was even going to Titans. So, whether it's a mystery thing, but if you really feel like, you're going to take a quarterback, the Browns could say, we're going to take one of, a quarterback without even giving it away. So they're not. I mean, the only reason you wouldn't would be for a trade. And if you trade, you're not going to get one of the two premier players, the alleged
right,
premier players. So it's like, there's always drama and mystery and all this. That's why I'm just want to get it over with. And
right,
I'm not good at projecting. I just want to see what they got
right.
so we can
Exactly,
criticize them after the fact.
exactly. They make the hard decisions. We pick on them for making the hard decisions. That's how it works. But that's not it for Shedeur Sanders. Later this afternoon, too late for me to work it into my slides, Louis Riddick went on ESPN and basically said, apparently speaking for the Sanders camp, that the Sanders camp now doesn't really want Shedeur to go in the top 3. They want him to go to one of the later teams because those teams are better prepared to compete, I guess. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but essentially the message that he relayed was that the Sanders camp doesn't really mind not being in the top 3 picks. So we're going to bring on a special guest to discuss this, who has opinions about it, Mr. Pete Smith. How you doing, Pete?
I'm angry. I'm good, but I'm angry. So, Louis Riddick not only went on ESPN and said this, he spoke with Mary Kay Cabot and expounded on this by basically saying that the Browns and the Giants, among these other teams, aren't equipped to develop Shedeur Sanders, and then tried to say that he really respects Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry and Deion's former teammate, Bill Musgrave, who's on the coaching staff. And then is saying, I'm not trying to disrespect these guys when he is clearly disrespecting these guys.
Right.
So what is happening? Reality has set in that Shedeur was never a top 3 pick. They are figuring this out the hard way. Their desperate hope was that the Browns or the Giants were so needy at quarterback that they'd go ahead and just take Shedeur and roll with it. If you've been paying attention to the OBR, if you're a subscriber, you knew this was not going to happen for basically the last 6 weeks. But here we are now figuring this out. So 5 days ago, or whatever Friday was, Deion is, pontificating and hyping and doing what he does and saying, well, I think the Browns are going to take Shedeur or Travis Hunter at 2. And here we are the following Wednesday. Oh, I don't really want to go in the top 3. This is stupid on its face. And then to have basically dispatch Louis Riddick, who already has stepped in it once this offseason with the Browns, making an absolute fool of himself. He, for people who don't remember, on the Sunday, on a random Sunday, Louis Riddick took to Twitter to say, I hope Myles Garrett never signs with the Browns. They don't deserve him, something, this, that, and the other. It was maybe 5 minutes after that the Browns announced that they were extending Myles Garrett, and immediately Louis Riddick had to go delete all of his social media posts and pretend it never happened. So he's already, sort of antagonized this team and this fan base. So to now go out and say this about the team, okay, they're not going to pick him at 2. They could theoretically, what has been a talk for a lot of these people. Okay, they'll pick Travis Hunter and then trade back up and get Shedeur. And then Deion gets both guys in one team after he's saying all these wonderful things. He's saying wonderful things about Jimmy Haslam that no one here would say about Jimmy Haslam. So this is stupid. And what makes it worse is Shedeur has not done anything. So what you are doing is you are doing damage to Shedeur, who has not done anything. He has no part in this. I don't think Shedeur would say this. Shedeur thinks this because, according to our reporting, he had a great meeting with the Browns. The Browns liked him. There was all this talk about, there were teams that were turned off or he wasn't all that interested in. And then, Lane Adkins did a great job of finding out that no, the Browns really liked him and he liked them. And there was this. There was a vibe, even if it didn't necessarily mean he was going to go number 2 in the draft, but they liked him. So you are now setting that on fire and saying, don't draft my kid, which he could, they could have traded up into the teens and gotten him. And now you're trying to remove that. You're doing the same thing for the Giants. You're doing the same thing for all these other teams. And again, Shedeur didn't do any of this. And here's the part of the problem. There's always this talk about why should you hire an agent? Because these rookie contracts are already done essentially in a lot of ways.
Right.
Small nuances, little things that agents can fight for, but so much of it is this stuff. It's handling the communication element, handling the player. Because again, Shedeur didn't do this. His camp, which includes a Hall of Famer who should be focused on, and I get it, it's his son, but he should be focused on being the head coach of Colorado. And he gets a ESPN guy who interviews and never gets GM jobs to sort of be his mouthpiece. If he had an actual agent, this would never happen. They would their whole job is to make sure you don't do this. Don't damage yourself 2 weeks before the draft. Like this is not quite to the level of gas mask bong bad, but it's just needlessly doing yourself so much harm. And I feel awful for the kid because he's just sitting there and watching this happen in front of him.
Right.
It just awful.
All right. Thank you, Pete. Appreciate your perspective. And I know you wanted to comment on that, so glad to have you here, dropping by for a few minutes. We'll see you around, buddy. Thanks.
Take it easy.
All right. And that was Pete Smith commenting on the Louis Riddick announcement today, supposedly from Sanders' camp, that Shedeur really doesn't want to go in the top 3, and it is ludicrous.
Well, I don't know if this will change anything. I mean, I can't imagine team just we're not taking him now for that,
right?
But if that's the true what they want, they might very well get it. I think they're trying to cover their bases that they, it'd be like saying they're going to definitely draft Travis Hunter. And tomorrow I say they're definitely drafting Cam Horde. The next day they're definitely going to draft Shedeur Sanders. By the time I get done, I can always say I got it right. Somewhere you can find me saying that. And if they said, no, we didn't want to go the top 3, well, then if he gets picked by the Raiders or the Jets or the Saints, that's right. That's what we were saying,
Right.
So I don't.
If you say enough things, you'll be right.
I think they would rather be picked as high as they possibly can.
All right. So let's get back to the news. And one of the items in the news is that Travis Hunter has passed Abdul Carter to be the favorite in the Who the Browns Take at number 2 popularity contest. The betting odds at BetMGM are minus 135 on Hunter and now up to 100 on Carter. Much longer for Shedeur Sanders and all the others. Fred, are you buying this at all? What has happened that has suddenly made Travis Hunter the most popular choice on the board?
Well, I think, coming off that Colorado, and there's a little high there. Obviously, it doesn't seem like it lasted very long with Shedeur or Dion. The only thing I can think is because nobody that I know of has come out. I don't imagine they told them we're not taking you, because I don't know. I can see this seems to be more reaction to just national talking points. But my rationality is I've heard Andrew Barry talk about him a lot, talk about a unicorn. I saw one place where he went on and on. He had done a lot of research, or somebody did, and it talked about players like Charles Woodson and other ones that had done both. And he really went out of his way to say this guy is even, because he played so many more plays and on both sides of the ball. So I know it's a premium position. You need a wide receiver. You need more cornerbacks. In fact, especially when you're not sure what you're going to do with Greg Newsome long term, and you got Emerson coming up on his final year of contract. So this kind of can solve two solutions with one. I can be talked into the Abdul Carter. I know Pete and a lot of the rest on our group, that's who they want. But I look at Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 list, and there are 10 edge rushers in the top 50. And the Browns, in fact, there's 7 of them in the top 27. The Browns have 2 picks in the top 33. So it seems to me there's a much better chance to get maybe not Abdul Carter, but somebody that's got a first round grade as there is with a wide receiver.
Right.
It's also interesting if Hunter was just the wide receiver. I don't know if I would say the same thing if that's all he was doing was wide receiver, or if he was just a cornerback. But it just seems like they could use him in 2 different ways in high leverage situations, when it like passing downs on offense and defense, and not be out there every play. So that's where I lean, and I can see the sales point for Hunter over Carter. But I mean, I can go either way. I mean, yeah, the dominating pass rusher, but my logical thinking looking at this is, wow, there's a ton of edge rushers. And if you really want one, get one with the 33rd pick,
Right. Yeah.
But you got to get more firepower
sense.
on offense. That's why I've been harping on the quarterback all year. But if you aren't sold on the quarterback, get a difference maker wide receiver, then you can get a running back, and somehow figure the quarterback. I still think that if they could, the best answer all the way around is Kirk Cousins. Somehow, some way, figure it out. You draft Hunter. Now he waives his no trade because you didn't draft a wide receiver with the number 2 pick. If you draft Shedeur Sanders, you're not getting Cousins, in my opinion, because he knows he's going to start. Whoever you pick at 2 is going to start.
Right.
So that to me, you can kind of hit more shots with your clay pigeons with a wide receiver, a cornerback, and then you could probably still get a pretty good quarterback.
Right. Well, we will solve the quarterback problem here in just a minute. It's been 25 years. We can wait another 5-10 minutes. Deshaun is back in the news, and he's back in the news because ESPN put out an article quoting some NFL executives basically saying that if the Browns get rid of him after 2026 or even after 2025, that they don't necessarily see someone coming and picking him up. You can see the quote up there. He would have to take low QB money. He'd have to be a backup, something along those lines. And with $240 million in the bank, why bother? He may just not feel like doing that. And the NFL teams may not feel like picking him up. As far as the Browns are concerned, 2025, he's going to be injured. He re-injured his Achilles. Chances of him returning are slim. Do you see the Browns letting him go in 2026, Fred? They take a cap hit, but it would be over.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like they've moved on from him. You can't say it any more clear than the owner comes out and says that when you still, if you had to pay me $2,000 if I was still under contract, you probably wouldn't trash me until you got me out of the way. He's still being owed what, 46 million or 92 million, and he's on his payroll, and he's basically said, don't even bother, just stay home. Kevin and Andrew wouldn't address it. They used the excuse of the injury. I think the injury really bails them all out, because how much longer would they have done that last year? Let's say he never got hurt. Would he have played all 17 games? And I mean, it's fair to say, because Kevin was not making a change. Every week we saw the same thing, and it's like he gives us the best chance to win. So I think the injury, unfortunate for Deshaun, but no, I think deep down is pride, but I think last year it was all on the line. That was his chance. Everybody thought he was going to come back. I thought he might be comeback player of the year. And then we saw what happened in the first 7 games before the injury. I think part of it, in fairness to Kevin Stefanski, was he kept thinking next week he's going to break out. We did see some signs prior to that. So I can't explain what the new offense that was supposed to be better for him. Was it still something with his shoulder? I don't know. But that ship has sailed. Now, I don't know if his pride would allow him to go be a backup some other team for minimum salary. Money's not the issue. It's more, we know it's a quarterback-starved league. Just look at the backups in the NFL and the guys that were available in free agency. They get chance after chance after chance because it's so hard to get a quarterback. Somebody very well could say, what if, at age 30, he's still young, with no investment hardly at all, he resurrects his career. But it's like, how far down the road, is the baggage that he had from before? It's really about his production. Everybody would have forgot about his about his baggage by now if he would have been playing like Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow. Obviously, he wasn't. He was horrendous.
Right. So, Deshaun Watson, in the news again, not going to be relevant to the Browns.
Why are they even talking about it? I mean, I don't even. That's a no interest, non-story to me.
Yeah. I agree, but it's a story, so I threw it up there on the slides because people were talking about it. So
that's what you do.
Yeah, that's what I do. I talk about what people want to talk about, man. I'm a man of the people. All right. Speaking of being a man of the people, Mr. Fred Greetham has worked out with the Our folks that we can give away 5 copies of their hardbound draft guide, right? And we're going to do that right now, right in the middle of the program. And then we're going to solve the Cleveland Browns quarterback issue. So the way you enter this is you have to be in the chat room, and you have to be prepared to type a special word at my call. And the first 5 people who type that special word can then get a free copy of our last draft guide. Is that fair, Fred? You think that's fair?
I think it's fair.
I think it's fair. No, the word is not a special word. No, world's fastest fat man. The word is gimme. Gimme. Type gimme into the chat, and you will be entered to win the hardbound copy of the Our Lads draft guide for free. Just mailed to you. All you have to do is walk out to your mailbox, and there you go. So we've got 4 gimmies. We're waiting. There's the 5th gimme. So OG Philly, Drew in Brick City, Fumble 13, Axeman, and Sarist. You are the winners. So write to me at barry@theobr.com, that email, barry@theobr.com, with your real name and address, and we will mail this out to you. And then later on, I will show up at your house volunteering to cut your yard or, whatever for money. But, all right. I am told by our producer that those are not the winners, that I missed people. So we will get the official list from our producer. Because I screwed up again. But one place I can't screw up, Fred, is choosing the next quarterback, the Cleveland Browns. Are you ready to get this figured out finally after 25 years?
I've got it figured out. So, yeah.
All right.
You just never listened to me.
Well, at least I I wrote Tyler Shook's name correctly on this slide. So what I've done is I've said Cam Ward's not going to be available. Cam Ward's not going to be available. It's going to be one of these four guys that the Cleveland Browns are going to go after. These are four guys who have visited the team in addition to Cam Ward, who's probably going to get taken at number one. And so I put their strengths and weaknesses on the chart, which should give us all the information that we need to make a decision here, Fred. So first thing you have to do is agree with what I put on the slide, which we'll walk through. So Shedeur Sanders, some of his strengths are accuracy. He has a high completion percentage. His mechanics are really good. He avoids turnovers, and he has a leadership personality. So I'm sure he has other strengths beyond that. He's a smart kid and all that sort of stuff. But that's what I put down because I was limited to write only 3. But the weaknesses are he takes a lot of sacks. There's a question about whether he's really going through his progressions or not, or whether he's throwing at the first guy. And then there are also questions about his arm, which I've heard disputed, and the fact that he's sort of a media magnet. Is that fair on Shedeur Sanders as far as positives and negatives, Fred?
Well, I guess, but who's the people putting this out are writers usually, and it, it just kind of seems to be if you get some main person go one way, then other ones, well, you know it because you see the aggregators. They write it, and then it's over and over and over, and pretty soon it's, this is the narrative that I thought he, was really accurate in college. He likes the all-time most accurate passer, and the other day they were raving about him throwing 60, 70-yard bombs, so
right.
To me, I don't know who the experts are, and who aren't. You got some, right. I know it wasn't Riddick was one guy, but Todd McShay was going on and on about how the Browns should take him number 2 because of, all the strengths. So I would be happy with taking, if Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter are generational talents, taking one of them and getting, whoever you like the best, but you're opening yourself up that you might not be able to get them, because what if the Jets or the Saints take Sanders at 9 and the Steelers take one of them, and you're left wanting to get Jackson Dart, but nobody will trade with you, and then you're stuck with whoever, maybe you don't really like. Shook, okay. I've already said, I've been there, done that with the Brandon Weeden. This guy's 26 years old. I mean, I don't know if he's my cup of tea. As analytic driven as this group is, I would have to think that they would have him kind of close to being crossed off. You said that, I know he visited, but I don't know. I mean, where's the threshold of being too old? You hear about the guardrails. So, he had this 7 years of college. I mean, that's kind of like Tommy Boy's best 7 years of his life, down the drain,
right.
So I don't know. I don't know much about him other than Greg Cosell said he was the second best quarterback in the draft. So I don't know why he's not higher. I have to think the age factor. So this is kind of the scenario that I would like to see come take the best position guy, and then try to trade up or take a guy like Jalen Milroe. I can't get past that 4.37 speed, but the key is getting a quarterback that can play now and maybe even for 2 years. And that's where I think Kirk Cousins enters the picture. Or, like, I was going to say something like Derek Carr, because Saints are one of the teams talking about taking Sanders if he falls to 9. If something like that happened, that could free up. But if you take the non-quarterback, I think you have a chance. I think Cousins will work his way out of Atlanta somehow, knowing that the only starting opportunity he has is with the Browns, and they can work it out.
Right. So in your view, you land Cousins, and then you get a guy like Milroe to develop, maybe for 1 year, maybe for 2 years, and you got Kenny Pickett. You don't need Deshaun Watson next year. You got 3 guys in your quarterback room, at least as far as we know for now. Problem solved. The only thing I would add to that, I would be happy with that too, if they either drafted Milroe at the top of the second, or maybe even traded up a little bit to get Milroe. The only thing that alarms me a little bit is that just reading the bio on Jackson Dart, look at it. He's got all the measurables. He's got arm strength. He's mobility. His weaknesses are that he looks at his first read and then scrambles quickly, supposedly. His decision making's been questioned. And, he didn't exactly take Ole Miss to the national championship. But,
Well, I kind of put him in with Milroe. If they like Dart better, I'd go get him. But I'm thinking Dart might be drafted before they can get to him. I think Ward, Sanders, and Dart will be drafted in the first round, and you might not be able to get up high enough to get him. I don't think he'd get past Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's my concern as well. You'd have to get up past 21 to get Dart. But, he's not Josh Allen, but these are some of the same things people were saying about Josh Allen as he left college. He's got all the measurables. He looks like a great quarterback, but he played at, this school, and, they were great at that school, but it wasn't against top defenses and all that sort of other thing. And so that's just sort of the vibe I get when I read about him. That would make me interested in either Dart or Milroe, really, as a quarterback who you can develop, right? Not a guy you're going to throw in the starting lineup right away. But I agree with you. The Steelers.
Milroe, you see that speed and you think Lamar Jackson, but you see that arm. He's got the best arm in the draft. You see Josh Allen. I was not as high on Josh Allen because he had like a 50% completion rate,
right?
Which about, I don't know what Milroe is, but it's low. And so that's where you're not forced to play the guy, and that's where if you could get Cousins, and if he got hurt, you got Pickett, and you don't have to throw the kid out there and get him ruined. The Browns have ruined so many quarterbacks because they just couldn't wait to get him out there and truly develop the guy. You got Tommy Reese, Stefanski, and you could do a package for him, but I can see going that route. It's just we're not privy to know who they really like or don't like.
Right.
And, if they could just take whoever they want, they'd probably take Ward, I think. But take him out of it, who would they pick out of this group? And then you come into, but where are they getting picked? Because if they would really take Sanders anywhere, then why wouldn't they take him at 2? Because you need a quarterback. Is he better than anything you have? Is he better than Pickett or any of your options? Because the danger as I've said a few times, is you don't take a quarterback, then Kirk Cousins turns you down or the Falcons don't let him out. You're stuck with Kenny Pickett. That's it.
Yeah.
You got to then bring in Joe Flacco or Wentz to be the other guy. And that's it. You don't have, anybody but you're drafting, Will Howard or Kyle McCord or somebody like that in the 3rd, 4th round or wherever, and hope you can get something out of that.
Right. Well, I tell you what, I don't know if we've necessarily solved the Browns' 25-year-old quarterback problem, but at least we've discussed it, and so we get points for that. So let's go to questions. Actually, before we go to questions, let me talk about our good friends at Core Home Fitness. You can find them at corehomefitness.com. They make the world's best adjustable dumbbells. They also make the racks, the incline benches, all the stuff that you need to work out and become shredded. That become sort of an anti-web dork. That's what you want to do. Is you want to be an anti-web dork, and these tools will help you get there to be not me. They have rated Best Buy by Consumers Reports. These guys have a great staff. They have a fantastic customer service group, and they have fast shipping and hassle-free returns. So Core Home Fitness, bring the gym home in 2025, and thank you to Core Home Fitness for supporting the OBR. All right, so let's go to the first question from Fumble13, Fred. He says, I would rather have a dominating defense and win 14-10. Carter over Hunter. What say you guys? What say you, Fred?
Well, you got to pick your poison, like I've already said here, is Carter so much better than Jalen Walker or Mike Green? Or like I said, there's 10 of them. There's 7 of them listed, according to Daniel Jeremiah, in the top 27 edge rushers. You got more on your roster right now. You got, a bunch of suspects like Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright, and you signed Joe Tryon, Shoyinka. You still have Obo Okoronkwo and that. So I just feel like you have more chance to address more needs if you went the Hunter route. But right. I can be sold the Carter route. But I remember a number 1 overall Penn State defensive end the Browns drafted that was looked like, Adonis, but he got hurt all the time. He never really played much. Right. His career kind of fumbled out of control. Not comparing Courtney Brown to Abdul Carter, but yeah, it's what can you make the most impact for this team? You need playmakers. You need to score points. Yeah, the defense didn't hold the opponent to 10 points last year. Would Abdul Carter make that happen? Okay, you can tell me that would be. Then you just have that's your only chance, because you can make the same point if you don't have any quarterback throwing the ball. It doesn't matter who's playing wide receiver; they can't get him the ball. Look at the difference when Watson went down, when Jameis Winston took over. Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman all looked like legitimate NFL wide receivers. I mean, they just took off immediately. And so that's why the quarterback is such a big issue. But if it's between the two, I'm kind of on the fence, but I'm still leaning more Hunter. I think that offense is, I think you could solve Shedeur Smith. You can at least bring him back. He was your second leading sack man last year, and he only played half the season. He would add 10 sacks probably if he'd have stayed here. But yeah, I don't know. That's why they have to make the right decision.
I say 2 things. One is I'm very interested in the development of Isaiah McGuire. He looked very good at the tail end of last year. Be interesting to see if he or Alex Wright, can fill that need. You add another edge rusher to that. Boy, that has some potential. And the other thing I would say is that, Travis Hunter can help you hold a team to 10 points too, right? By playing quarterback, right? So,
that's what I'm saying, other than Denzel Ward, you really don't have anybody you can count on. Greg Newsome has not been what you thought you were getting with a first-round pick. And MJ Emerson dropped off last year. So if you had your bookend award over there in Jim Schwartz's defense, I think that would go a long way, as far as, so, I get the rush. but it'd be nice if you had the first 3 picks, if you could take Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter, but you don't. So
Yeah, we
it's
were
like a
horrible,
piece
but
of
not that
it's a
horrible.
puzzle.
Right.
And that's where my reasoning is I went through the top 50 players according to NFL Network, and the most by far was edge rushers. There was 10 out of 50. That's 20% of the top end players. There was only 5 wide receivers. There was, I think, second was cornerbacks. There was 8 of them.
Right.
But so it just seems to me you have a much better chance, even if at 33 getting a first round defensive end. When there's 7 in the top 27, there's 32 teams picking. So yeah, one of those guys, whatever their name, it doesn't matter, are probably not Abdul Carter. But would, instead of getting 14 sacks, what if you got a guy that got 10 or 11? Would that be the end of the world?
Right. It's a good question. Good question. Another good question comes from World's Fastest Fat Man. He says, are the Browns giving any indication about picks other than the first 2? The only thing anyone is talking about is the first 2 picks, so any other news would be super welcome. Well, I think you can tell a little bit from the top 30 visits that they're interested in linebackers and defensive tackles a little bit more than would be expected. But I think, Fred, the one pick which is coming, maybe on day 2, maybe on early on day 3 is going to be running back. There's just so many talented running backs out there, and we need some help at that position.
Yeah, I mean, there's 10 or 12 that in the top 50, again, NFL.com, there's 5. And other Ashton Genty and Mario Hampton, which are projected to be first round picks, there's some really good backs, and 2 of them are from Ohio State, the guy from Iowa, but that's only 5. I know there's about 12 listed, and I think you can get a really good one of these backs in the 3rd round, at the 67, or even at 94. You might be able. You have 5 picks in the first 104. That's 100, the best 100 players in the draft. You have a chance to get 5 of them. You got to hit on those. You got to hit on at least 4 of the 5 that help you right away. And so the higher to the top, I think it would logically, you have a better chance on them hitting. I think if you, with your quarterback, whether it's Pickett or a rookie, you need to get the running game going again. And so I would get the best running back I could get, maybe outside the first round.
Right.
Maybe even at 33, you take a Travion Henderson or Judkins or something to make sure you get them.
Right.
But I still think you can get, whether it be Johnson or Sampson, or we know in the past running backs have slid down. I don't know how many are going to go, but I'd take 2, because I think Nick Chubb will ultimately be back, but I would rather have Jerome Ford, Nick Chubb, and 2 rookies, and let those rookies battle to either beat out Jerome Ford, so you have 2 for the future to go with Chubb this year, or with the idea that next year, if Chubb moves on, if this is his last year, it's either going to be make or break if he comes back. He's going to be really good or get back where he could hang around for longer than a year, or he's going to be one and done. So if you got 2 rookie backs, a higher pick and maybe one of the ones that slips, in the later rounds, you got 2 coming back going forward. You want to get your running game going back to that wide zone with the same offensive line to get back to the top upper echelon in the running game, shorten the game, old smash mouth football, play action pass, but you're going to have to get a back or 2. And Deontay Foreman, wasn't going to do it. And you can't rely on Chubb being what he is. So that's where I just think a high pick on a top end running back this time would be worth it. And I don't mean first round. I'm saying maybe as high as the second round, but I think you can do well in the third round.
Yeah, I think you can as well, as deep as this class is. E. Gillen writes, despite some of the new tight ends added in free agency, does Fred see us adding one in the draft? They did have one tight end for a visit, Arroyo, I think from Miami. But it's not like they brought in 5 of them like they did at quarterback. You think that's going to happen, Fred?
Yeah, I think I've been calling for them to draft one the last year or two because what they did with Harrison Bryant. I mean, a 4th round pick, you get him for 4 years. They let him go after 4 years, but David Njoku's been great when he's healthy, but he gets a little dinged up, and then you don't have anybody. I mean, really, you're going to go back more, I think, to a more of a 2 tight end offense. And last year, you only really had 1 tight end other than the guys you were bringing up from your practice squad when Njoku was hurt. So he's 29. He's still young, but I think that this draft suits and matches up to where the Browns have needs. It's deep in tight ends. It's deep in running backs. It's deep in edge rushers, defensive linemen later on. And so I just think they got to choose wisely. But you get a pass catching, a good tight end, a young tight end, and you have him for 4 years. You're bringing Akins back 1 year at a time. They haven't brought him back yet. But if you look at free agency, there's like no tight ends available. I mean, it's just like nothing out there. The only one kind of mentioned was Michael Meyer, who's with the Raiders, because they got Brock Bowers that they might want to trade him. But so far they said they don't want to trade him. So I certainly think they're going to draft one. I don't know how high, but I would think when you get to the 4th round, that's when you could start looking at a tight end. If a Harold Fannon's available out of Bowling Green or something like that. There's 4 ranked in the top 40 tight ends. Now there's 2 that are real top 10 ranked, but yeah, there's a couple there that this Arroyo guy would be, I think, kind of a perfect one.
Right. Well, let's see. There's just so many needs and only so many draft picks. I want to take this next question from Solo Eagle. He says, "Why don't you think Howard can run Kevin's offense?" That's not something we said. He was talking in the chat, but I just want to get your impression on Will Howard because I'm a Buckeyes fan, so I like bringing up Buckeyes.
Well, I'm not a super fan of just because he's Buckeye. I thought that was a pretty impressive run in the playoffs because I, like probably a lot of Ohio State fans, was not very high on him, especially in that Michigan game. That was one of the reasons I think Kyle McCord got somewhat run off because, in the biggest games, he kind of collapsed when you needed him. And Howard then looked great in the playoffs. He's got that size. He's got a lot going for him. I don't know. I mean, as far as he's a guy that I would think you could develop, but whether it's Milroe, Dart, Howard, not so much McCord to me personally, but those guys are guys you can take, but those are going to have to be developmental, these aren't guys. Yeah. I want somebody that's ready to go. I'm tired of developing or throwing rookies that aren't ready in there. And that's why I say, find a way to get Kirk Cousins so you take all that pressure off. Then you can take a developmental guy. I would be okay if you got Cousins and you couldn't get any of those other guys, Dart or Milroe or whatever. You ended up take Will Howard to work with him and develop because he's got a lot of the intangibles. I like him a lot, his character and leadership and those things, but I just think he needs a little more time.
Right. I think so too. I like Will Howard a lot. measurables are fantastic. Good runner, he's got the size for that. Two things that bug me about Will Howard, as a Buckeye fan who watched him every game, watched every snap this year that Will Howard took. One is the tendency to loft the ball, which showed up in his pro day, because he's used to Jeremiah Smith being able to run under and beat anybody to the ball that he could, and some of his decision making, like the last play against Oregon. So I don't think he's ready to insert in the starting lineup, but if he's available in like the fifth or something like that, taking a flyer on him, I wouldn't mind that at all.
Yeah, you could make a case that he had more weapons with the Buckeyes than the Browns had last year on offense.
Well, they certainly
look at all these guys that are going to get drafted, on offense. Two or three linemen probably, at the top, the wide receivers, and the best one, all of them, was a freshman in Smith, and and you got the two backs. So, hey, just don't mess it up. Get the ball to those guys. So, yeah. Now, I guess that's the thing. There's no sure shots in this. It's really getting in the right system and, developing somebody. One thing we just really haven't seen over the years with Browns quarterbacks, because they haven't developed anybody really, because they've needed them to play and they get thrown out there and they get hurt, and then that's the end of them. So that's where I just think if you could get some stability, a veteran that could come in. And when I really thought that's where they'd be by now, they'd have a veteran, and I wasn't meaning Kenny Pickett.
Right. They're expressing a lot of confidence in Pickett, but I think if he's, the guy, when the season starts, a lot of Browns fans are going to be disappointed. World's fastest fat man, again, he says, we trade back into the first to have a fifth year on a QB. Would Cousins be willing to come to Cleveland? And I'll give you my opinion, Fred. I think it depends on who it is. I mean, if you're getting a Jalen Milroe, he may not be ready for a year or two. And so Cousins may think, yeah, for sure, I've got a year to prove myself as still a competent quarterback at 36.
Well, I agree with that. I think that what he means is number two. I know if you take a guy number two, he's going to start. If you take a guy in the top 10, they're probably going to start. And that's what happened. Penix was the number 8 pick overall. Mm-hmm. If you trade back up, I'm not so sure they feel they have to get that fifth year option, deal. It can be expensive, giving up picks and so forth just to do that. I think they're going to have to read the room and see whether somebody's going to take them or not in the first round.
Right.
And they'd be fine if they knew Milroe was going to be there at 33 or Jackson Dart was going to be there at 33. But you don't know that. Somebody can swoop in anytime and take the guy. So, but I think what Cousins is looking for, I think Ward and Sanders are the only two considered that are going to start as rookies, ready to go.
Right.
Jackson Dart might, but he would be probably, like you said, either you stay where you're at, but more than likely you're going to have to trade up because somebody's going to probably take him in the first round. If you had to go up as high as 15, I think Atlanta picks there to get Dart, I still don't think necessarily that he's a lock to start, and Cousins might look and say, he just wants to start with really no competition, at this stage of his career. And I don't think he would look at as Kenny Pickett is legitimately in his way to be the starting quarterback. Plus, the Browns are going to have to give him some assurances. And that's one of the things why I feel like that would give them license to take Hunter or Carter, whoever they liked best, if they knew they were going to be able to have something in place to bring Kirk Cousins here. It takes all the pressure off. You could play to win now. But if you don't have that assurance, you're kind of really taking a big gamble, in my opinion.
Right. Well, we've got one last question. from a fellow calling himself Lane Atkins. He says, Fred Berry sitting here today, would you select Sanders with the number 2 pick in the draft? If so, what qualities would lead you to that decision? I'll let you go first. Would you pick him?
As you know, again, I'm not watching all the film. Look at the stats. I could be persuaded. If they feel they believe in him, then they should take him. But
Right.
I think the other players are better and could. Again, the asterisk is that quarterback, that pathway to a veteran, legitimate quarterback. I think a Kirk Cousins is better than Sanders right now. And all I read is his ceiling, is not that high.
Right.
I don't like
what
the
he
off the
will
field
be.
baggage necessarily from his family, but
Mm-hmm.
if you believe in him that he's the guy, you take him. But I would today take Hunter.
Right. Well, I would not take Sanders at number 2 because I'm an idiot and I follow groupthink. And groupthink now is that Sanders is not a number 2 pick, so he can't be a number 2 pick because that's what the media tells me. So I don't know. I think he'd be a great pick at like 6 or 8 or something like that, where you're not rationalizing passing up Hunter or Carter to get him. And so a trade down into that area and picking Sanders, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. The problem is just taking him at number 2. So that's just my that's my media influence take on the Sanders question. Thank you, Lane. Appreciate it. Appreciate you hanging out with us in the chat room as well. And also Casey Kinnaman showed up in the chat room as well. So good to have the guys hanging out with us here a little bit. So that's another Wednesday night, Fred. Another OBR Weekly, another online streaming spectacular. Thank you, sir, for your wisdom, as always. And thank you to all the folks. Yeah, well, I hope it is. I hope it is fun. And I hope it's fun to watch, too. So thank you for everybody who's hanging out in chat and feeding us questions and all the great comments I see scrolling by as we go through. Apologies to Axeman. Axeman, I'm sorry I called your name as a winner. The instant replay showed that you were a little bit later than my stream indicated, so apologies to you. I'm very sorry that I may have misled you. And that is it. We will be back next Wednesday at 7 o'clock as we creep closer to the draft with another edition of OBR Weekly. Good night, everybody.
2 weeks from today is draft eve.